Start. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sui Generis, here where we try to demystify different contexts in terms of the future. We want to take what they call a paranomic visit in terms of intellectual discourse to make some substantive arguments as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. I am here with a brilliant young man. I know many of you have probably heard about him. Is John Katende. We want to discuss certain issues, brainstorming on a number of concepts. We haven't prepared really, but we are prepared in terms of the fact that we present ourselves as substantive, formidable individuals for the future. So we have prepared at all times. Yeah. So we don't believe in luck. Yeah. What is luck? Opportunity meeting with what? Right preparations, so they say. So we're going to have some discussions in terms of AI, but how AI is relating to the youth in terms of the future. Mr. Katende, when you hear of AI today, I know that the average kids will probably understand what AI is. The older generation may not really comprehend what AI is. But even in the Ugandan context, even the basic interpretation of what AI is and what AI can do seems to be a preview of only particular individuals. Because when you talk about AI, the applications of algorithms, I was watching a discussion from Harvard Harvard professor who was discussing on advanced algorithms in terms of the application of AI. And I was trying to comprehend and understand how it works in terms of patterns and systems and stuff like that. In the ordinary understanding of AI, how would you replicate that to the youth of today? What is AI beyond basic things like what? Like help me find my way out here. Where is the nearest KFC center? Those trivialities. How would you comprehend AI for the future? Yes.
Yeah, hello everyone. So artificial intelligence from the start, it's the simulation of human processes into computer systems. The simulation of computer processes into computer systems. In other words, humans see. So in artificial intelligence, we have a concept of computer vision. Human beings walk, so we have motion AI, like self-driving cars, robots. Humans can talk, so we have speech recognition in AI. We are basically trying to find things that humans can do and replicate them into computer systems at various levels.
So by saying that, that's okay. They are bringing some tea. Please feel free to bring the tea. We are having a tea discussion, really. So by saying that, it's a question of replicating what humans. So it's robotics, to use that phrase, or machines that have been engineered in such a way that they can be able to replicate, right, what a human being would do. Is that right?
Exactly.
Now
the future lies in going beyond what a human being can do, and
that is the future.
That is the future.
Do you see that as a possibility?
It's starting to become a very realistic possibility, actually.
Why?
Because there are things that you cannot do even now that a computer can do. However, when we talk about the advancement of artificial intelligence technology, we're talking about a time when computers shall be able to outperform the smartest human being across a certain range of parameters. For example, a certain Michigan professor categorized AI under 4 different types. He talks about reactive machines. These are machines that are task specific with no memory. They simply fed information, for example, like they can monitor your purchase history so that they can make recommendations. they do not keep any memory, any track of their past mistakes to get better, but they simply navigate through your search history, like Netflix. Then they recommend the better movies that you're interested in. They look at your browsing behavior on the internet, and then they come up with recommendations. They are reactive machines. They are reactive because they use your past existing data to react to give recommendations. Now, compared to you, you do not have all your data. You are not conscious of all your activity. You might not notice even the smallest patterns to react upon them. Human behavior is more random than programmed.
Now, wait a minute, because I'm going to give you a lot of hard time. Expect a lot of hard time.
Okay.
By saying that, that becomes an advantage of a human over a machine. Do you agree?
Yes.
The fact that a human being has the ability to not to be boxed, let me use that phrase, and the fact that a machine has the ability to be boxed, that becomes a disadvantage of sorts, right?
That's uncommon. So I was telling you about reactive machines. No memory, task specific. They're able to study your previous behavior, give recommendations. They cannot learn from their past mistakes. Like IBM Deep Blue versus Garry Kasparov. The computer can analyze positions, predict the moves that are coming, but it cannot learn from its own previous mistakes to get better. Now, those are reactive machines. The second categorization of artificial intelligence is limited memory. Those have a certain bit of memory. They're able to learn from their past and improve and become better. That is where the concept of machine learning applies. That is where the concept of deep learning applies. So just like human beings learn, computers can also learn. Why they call it machine learning is because it is not necessarily just programmed A plus B is equal to C.
Okay.
It is learning to become better.
Put it plainly.
Yes.
When you say learning, I would understand, but I want our viewers to understand. When you say learning, what exactly do you mean?
What I mean exactly there is that if you are talking about a computer, I'm giving a basic example so that people can understand it. And I'm going to use a live example of an AI machine that is currently deployed in the field. For example, you know English, right? You want to teach a machine English so that it can understand when someone types, so that it can respond to basic questions. Or you might want to teach the machine or computer Luganda or Lusoga or Nyankole, and you want it to be able to understand Luganda, its response, by just doing a voice search. Hi Siri, Jebale, what in Luganda. You want that to happen. It simply means that you're going to get a computer system. You're going to build a data set, introduce to it the language you want it to learn. So in that sort of regard, you're going to introduce a lot of text from Nyankole, voice from Nyankole, and in the process, you are making the machine smarter. It's learning that language. Now, that's what people call training. You are training the system about your language, what you want it to learn. So why the concept of neural networks, large language models comes in is because now you are introducing very large quantities of data to this particular computer system, and you want it to perform a certain way. So it's not just like, well, here is a lot of data set for this particular language, but you want it to have a certain way it gives you the output. You want it, for example, to be able to listen to radio, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, generate a transcript. So for you to do that, for example, there is a system that was built by McCary University Artificial Intelligence Lab. It was also built by UN Global Powers that listens to radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This system was trained on a lot of radio data. They fed it text. There was a lot of transcription done, annotations, like being able to transcribe audio data into written data, and then they're able to match the two. So that process was repeated for large volumes of data. Then over time they introduced a model, a segregation model that can separate the types of data, for example. It can understand that this is music, this is sports, this is what, or you can introduce a keyword spotter to filter for you, which is this tourism related, is this let's say politically related, that sort of data. So all of those are machines learning to get better. Now, beyond limited memory, there comes in the third categorization of AI, which is theory of mind. Now, theory of mind is where it's a futuristic approach, especially the third and the fourth, theory of mind and conscious AI or self-awareness. We're talking about the ability for artificial intelligence not just to receive information, be trained about upon that information, become better, but also we're talking about the ability of machines to become self-aware. And in fact, I think Elon Musk has recently said that, for example, if AI can become so self-conscious that it can fix its own programs and reprogram itself. That means that it is actually able to take a certain other direction from what the original authors had intended.
So you think that would be the best of AI?
We cannot really rule out the possibilities, but so far what we have seen with AGI, okay, some people, what the categorizations I've given you, some would put it between narrow AI and artificial general intelligence, and categorize artificial general intelligence it's where it's believed that computers will be able to match human intelligence and perhaps be able even to become better.
Okay, so what I would like you to build on is that self-conscious AI that now may become substantively a threat, because when you say that to the populace, they would easily say, wait a minute, are you trying to say that now we are quote unquote creating a human being? Let me take you back to scripture. I know you're scripture, I know you are a godly man. And scripture says, when God says, let us make man in our own what? Image. In our own image. They gave him that ability perhaps to think and take decisions. And I think that's the difference between the Calvinists and the Arminists in terms of theological, those of you who probably follow theological arguments or perhaps schools of thought in terms of that context. So are you arguing, Mr. Katende, that there is a possibility of that self-consciousness now? And that reminds me of the movie, you probably watched the movie called iRobots. Have you watched iRobots? You probably need to watch iRobots. One of the professors asked and said, what is your fear? He said, the biggest fear that I have with this AI or this robotic is the ability for it now to begin to take conscious decisions by itself. In fact, that's what your AI in that movie, we're not really talking about movies, but movies kind of tell us a little bit of the future, is that this, what was unique one, was unique, this particular robot was unique. It had the ability to take those unique decisions. It could even sense emotions and feeling. That may be replicated because of the language processing thing that's adaptable. But then the other point is where you're saying the ability for a robot to gain that consciousness within itself and also take independent decisions that were not quote unquote even envisaged within the creation when they are creating these robotics. That is a very scaring statement, Mr. Katende. Expound on that.
It's a scaring statement that is usually thrown around by people that are advocating for ethical AI, and they're advocating for a certain kind of regulation when it comes to artificial intelligence. Now, the ability of a computer to exhibit emotions has been argued out in the past. For example, last year, a Google engineer called Blake stated that when he was training Lambda, a chatbot that Google was building at the time, that Lambda started to exhibit a certain level of sentient. He even claimed that if he didn't know that this was a machine, he would refer to it, perhaps he would mistake it for an 8-year-old child that is extremely very gifted at chemistry. He asked it certain questions, and so that brought in the discussion of is it possible for computers to exhibit consciousness, to have a certain sense of souls, in that sort of regard. So the worry is there, but there are certain things that are being done, for example, to mitigate that kind of worry or to mitigate that kind of risks.
Okay, just let me cut you short because I want us to speak as much as possible. I mean, the worry is there and the regulatory powers are there, but then I'm still yet unconvinced, because if you're saying the worry is going to be limited because of the ethical concerns, because now that's where you're going, the ethical concerns of the fact that we're equipping this machine, the ability to resonate and what operate on its own without even being any control. The challenge is, do we see it losing? Do we lose control? Do we see it having its own its own dispensation, if you like, its own ability to do things completely independent of human intervention or interaction? Perhaps that's a fear that people may have. And when you watch some of these movies again, you see instances where the machines overtake the world, and people look at it that way. There's a movie, you probably watched it, it's called Better Than Us. Yeah, it's incredibly done by the Russians, and the argument there was these young men who actually had a vendetta against everything had to do with machines. They broke machines and fought them, and there was this super AI that had been created from China and then exported to America, and it could have those, what you're talking about, the feelings, the emotions. It even reached an extent of actually asking for emotional attachment to the human being. Yeah, which reminds me of what Elon Musk, the other time I saw adverts of AIs that having created images of women and men, remember, to the extent that they could have interactions, sexual interactions, by the way, emotional attachments. And we're seeing a replacement of robotics, that robotics are now ceasing to be a machine. It's not even a question of objectophilia anymore, but it's now a question of creating a person you can actually relate to. People now can literally have an interaction with AI, chat. I know you're doing a chatbot right now, and in terms of justice, whatever, but do you see that it's a direct replacement of humanity of sorts? And is that a fear that everyone should be afraid of? You have not yet given me a categorically clear answer. You are dodging the question, Mr. Katende. I want you to look straight in the camera and tell us, should my grandchild or should my friend be worried of this machine? Is this something you said, no way, let's stop it?
I think the technological revolution is something that stands on the shoulders of research. And that is where the confusion comes from. The confusion is being brought about by the fact that people who you'd consider technologically exposed researchers are moving around with a lot of fear and throwing the same fear to the populace. And that is why it gets a little bit challenging. Elon Musk, in his interview previously with Tucker Carlson, stated that he does not see a time at which AI would really get out of control. He said that because much of the infrastructure, and that is something that we actually had discussed together earlier in February, that it is not so easy for machines to get completely out of control because much of the infrastructure through which they operate is largely controlled by humans. For example, if a robot is moving around, robot is moving around without energy, an energy source, either they're having some power source of lithium-ion batteries or something like that. So if energy runs out, that means that the operations would effectively run. The same applies to computers. If, however phenomenal using a computer might be, if it runs out of battery or power, it would definitely get switched off. So people,
yes, I agree with you, Mr. Katende. But in that perspective, there's a limitation.
I'm still.
Ask me why, because I want to put a stop there.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to give you a lot of trouble. The reason why I'm saying there's a limitation, I was doing some research on renewable energy.
Yeah.
To the extent that now these ideas of batteries running out of place actually it's not a question of worry anymore, because now they have actually generated systems of batteries that self rejuvenate themselves. You don't even have to go and charge them by themselves. The fact that there's solar energy everywhere, it has the ability to regenerate.
Yeah.
So I think when you say it's a question of battery feeding, we're losing the debate there.
No, it's what I'm actually saying is that, for example, I'm actually very familiar with renewable energy and the kind of technologies that you're talking about. I am one of the people that tried to see how to, like what Tesla did in terms of fitting many batteries together to create a certain kind of system, and then maybe they make it a bit self-sustaining to ensure that the batteries can last for a longer period of time. I'm one of the guys that back in 2018 tried to see how that could be done and replicated in certain systems in Uganda. So I'm very well conversant with that type of technology. For example, I can give you another example, the light bulb. There is a bulb that has been lighting since 1901. But why is it that our bulbs at home cannot light for 5 years? It goes back to a concept of planned obsolescence. It's a concept that was born in 1925 when the 4 major bulb manufacturers, Philips of the Netherlands, Associated Electronics of Britain, Tokyo Electronics of Japan, and General Electronics of Germany, sat down, we formed what they called a Phoebeus cartel, and they established a monopoly of bulb manufacturing. They said that no one should make a bulb that should go beyond 1,000 hours. At the time, bulbs could go for 2,500 hours, and they had seen a drop of their bulb sales from 300 million to, was it to 64 million or 28 million? I don't remember so well. There were even penalties of what would happen if someone did a reliable product. So going back to your point, it remains valid that the technology, that is one way of answering, responding to you, that the technology can actually be existence, but it can only be applied to the extent that those that are using it
accept it. Okay, the same argument that Steve Jobs said. I have so much, but the world is not ready to do that. Mr. Katende, let's not hide away from the truth. I want you to tell me, robotics and AI, it's a scare zone, but without even arguing into the immense capabilities that I know you're a researcher, you research here at Sui Generis plus other entities. Do you see a danger? Let's speak from an academic point of view. Do you see a danger, and for the youth for that purpose, if I'm a lecturer, I do supervise students, a student has gone and I've asked a question and they've used ChatGPT to generate an answer. From an intellectual point of view, but also from an AI point of view, would you be offended by that?
There are 2 things here that we need to factor in. The first thing is Larry Page's argument of digital consciousness. Larry Page, partly why he separated with Elon Musk is because Elon Musk believed in human consciousness generally.
Right.
In fact, Larry Page called him a speciesist. Larry Page believed in the concept of establishing a digital god, making Google more like this digital god in which we both have not just human consciousness, but also digital consciousness. Now, if we were able to employ, to respect, to integrate digital consciousness in our social contract, it would ideally be pretty much okay, according to me, if someone was able to use the complementing power of a computer system to sweeten or make their analysis better. I'm not saying really that they're cheating in exams. That would be the equivalent of sitting an exam and browsing the internet for answers.
Yeah, true, but
so
yes, and that argument is basic, Mr. Katende, because if you're saying, I mean, there was a time when Google came in, remember the Google thing, and they were like, that's cheating.
Yeah.
Okay, let's be basic. There was even a time when computers, he's cheating because he's typing, or perhaps typewriters is cheating. I think we're losing the debate if our argument is going to be trivialized on the fact that there is an innovation that is substantially able to quicken the work.
Yeah.
I had a brilliant gentleman here, my friend Mahiri, who made an argument and said, with my brain, if I'm equipped with ChatGPT and the likes, I would only use it to help myself become better in the skills that I do. I don't use it as an excuse. And I'm not saying loosely that there will be lazy people who are going to use it, but let's look at it on the other side of the coin. Let's not be so petty that we're saying, wait a minute, we're going to have problems because therefore we make a blanket statement and sweep it up. Yes.
So yeah, I think it comes from the perspective of how we perceive technology. Is it an enabler that is here to make our work simpler, make our work better, make our work faster? Or is it a tool that is just here, that is just going to be capitalized on by lazy individuals to cheat out in society? Now, both are possibilities, right? Both are possibilities. I cannot underlook the fact that there are some lazy students that would ideally just go to ChatGPT and use it to replicate the answers. And I can tell you, this is outrightly at play and happening across the
And
world.
who are you going to blame? Are you going to blame the inventor? Are you going to blame the student? Are you going to blame the lecturer?
It's hard to know who to blame because we need a value system we would need a value system that would inform us on who exactly has done wrong. The inventor is definitely right to come up with a system. He has no problem, even though like guys are going to call him in Congress and question him, like they ideally questioned Mark Zuckerberg and several other inventors about how Facebook is destroying people, how Instagram is making the youth more susceptible around societal ideation. They were blamed, even though they had, in quotes, innocently just developed a system. But it came with a lot of effects. I'm not saying that they're entirely innocent. That is why I put it in quotes, because a lot of psychological manipulation was embedded.
For me, my argument would be that it's a failure for the world to comprehend that the world is changing, and we have to change with it.
So listen, let me ask a simple question.
Before you ask the question, just let me make a simple argument of Boeing, right? Remember that supersonic Boeing that was invented? I was disappointed. I was in Germany and I was going through the museum, and I saw some of those that had been laid off, right? And they're not more, producing them anymore because they had issues. And these are things that will take off very fast. And just because there is a problem, perhaps because an engineer failed to solve a problem, and was causing a lot of accidents, and then you phase it up completely. How about if you thought a little bit ahead and made it better to protect society? For me, that's what I'm looking at. So to answer your question in terms of the question that I posed you, I would rather equip lecturers to accommodate and understand and acclimatize themselves with the fact that this is a new trend, but how do I, for example, judge or evaluate my students on the basis of the latest technology? You understand? I'll give an example. ChatGPT now is what we call ChatGPT 0, which is used as an anti-plagiarism tester for ChatGPT. So how about thinking a little bit ahead rather than blaming and pulling it down? Aren't we just pulling ourselves down?
Yeah, I guess it's a balance has to happen. You're arguing from a point that is so passionate about technology advancement,
right? And
as a technologist myself, I would argue from the same perspective, but I would also like to integrate in the context of the environment in which we are currently operating. Like, that is why we are talking about ethical considerations. Let me just mention 4, just to bring them to awareness. in the training of AI systems and deploying them, we have something called human augmentation. You get it? Human augmentation. A computer, an AI system that is giving recommendations of which movies to watch on Netflix is not at the same level as that one which is evaluating you and giving out bank loans. You understand?
Right.
So at some point, you have to involve the human in the loop aspect. Not just during the training, but you're going to supervise really how this machine works so that you can mitigate the would-be risks that might happen as a result of doing nothing. The other ethical consideration is bias evaluation. It has come to a point where we are no longer discussing bias, because the thing is, the highest principle of value of a society is truth, right? How we look at the truth influences how we act out in life, how we think, what we believe, and our conduct and behavior. But the reason as to why we have philosophical laws that can verify a truth claim is because there are philosophical laws like logical consistency, empirical adequacy, experiential relevance. The reason as to why we have those is because there are diverse sets of opinion in society that purport to be truth claims, right? So it is essentially very difficult to have one set of truth in many different circumstances. So someone will argue that there is a God, another person will argue that there is no God. You understand? And all of them are trying to make a truth claim. You get it? So why we are doing bias evaluation and not just taking out biases is because we have arrived at the fact that, at a realization that it might not necessarily be possible to eliminate bias, because what is biased to me is not biased to the other person.
Okay, now.
So let me just finish this. So what we are discussing then is ensuring that undesired biases are eliminated, but it may not actually be very successful for us to have all biases eliminated.
Now listen, and that's where you're coming from. That's where my
let me just
wait. I said I'm gonna give you trouble. I told you today you're in a hotspot, and you're gonna give you trouble, and that's where my argument is coming from.
Yeah.
Do you see a possibility? Oh, remember this guy who did CNN. What was the name? Ted Turner, right?
Yeah.
Remember Ted Turner after the war, yeah? After the Cold War, bragged and said, "I have been the person who has actually overcome what? I'm the guy to celebrate about the so-called Cold War.
Yeah.
America has won the Cold War because of Ted Turner, the CNN thing, right? Don't you see? Because you talk about bias, I don't want to lose that argument.
Yeah.
I have critical analyzed and comprehended what ChatGPT is doing. Do you realize that, especially beginning ChatGPT 3.5, right, to ChatGPT 4 now, okay, even to Genie AI and stuff, all those are ChatGPT that coming out, even Microsoft ChatGPT and blah blah blah. Do you realize that most of the information, if you remember initially when ChatGPT was generating information, it will tell you there is a possibility of error, there are faults and blah blah blah. Now they have actually graduated, if you have noticed, and they are not saying that anymore. Yeah, there are even those that can reference and blah blah. Do you realize that now the majority of the substantive information that's now being generated by ChatGPT platforms at a supersonic speed is content that is promoted by particularly videos deliberately, to subconsciously enter our minds and even influence us to argue in a certain way? Do you see bias already inflated that? Do you see that ChatGPT, in my opinion, is the next superpower without you knowing that is going to be used to fight wars and even overtake nations without you knowing?
Absolutely, it has that particular sort of potential. For example, like I have seen people. There's a time when there was a trend on Twitter. Guys were saying like, I asked ChatGPT to make a joke about Jesus. It instantly generated one. I told it to make a joke about Muhammad. It didn't. I told it to make a joke about men. It generated one. I told it to make a joke about women. It referred to it as sexism and misogyny of every sort. Right. So the thing is that it goes back to the statement that I made, that one of the highest principal values of a society is truth. ChatGPT has become a primary source of information for youngsters, starting from even kids as early as 5.
Absolutely.
And they're relying on it as an authority. So it influences their perspectives. So in other words, your kids are being raised by someone that has a certain kind of worldview, which is, in this case, is the ChatGPT worldview.
Absolutely.
So it essentially means that there's going to be a disruption in terms of civilizations, because most of the civilizations we are built on our ability to discuss things, for example, freely. That is where freedom of speech played a very important role. That the most important ideas in society were able to thrive because there was an open market in which discussions or discourse was being held. Now, if free speech is suppressed, that essentially means that certain ideas are suppressed and only a few cherry-picked ideas are able to thrive in society.
Absolutely.
So that would ideally affect our perception of reality.
Right.
So it has that power in terms of disruption, and in that context, a negative power. I mean, in our generation, there has been a lot of censorship because of cancel culture, and people have been asking what happened to accountability culture, because anybody that does not agree with the mainstream trend is zipped.
Right.
You understand?
Right.
People don't want to hear you anymore. In the early 20th century and late 20th century, most of the liberals would argue around tolerance. Let's tolerate each other.
Right.
But currently, it's not about tolerance. It's about acceptance. We must accept people the way we are. It's not about tolerating them. And George Carlin wrote a very impressive book called Brain Droppings, in which he was arguing around political correctness, because political correctness was a statement that was coined as early as 1979. So George Carlin argues, and he says that political correctness is America's new form of intolerance. It disguises itself as tolerance, yet it attempts to restrict language with rigid rules. I mean, he said, like, I am not sure whether restricting speech is the best method to solve problems that go much deeper than speech. So now here with the AI, either being Chat, just per Chat, Gemini, whatever language model, which is most likely filtered. What we are having is really not just a speech issue, but a system of faith that has been established, alongside which your kids and your children are actually going to grow.
Right.
Whenever they are looking for some sort of information, they're going to go to ChatGPT, they're going to ask it, and ChatGPT is actually going to forward a certain sense of perspective.
Right.
Now, previously, you could even condemn ChatGPT for generating what they call hallucinations, generating information that does not exist, but purporting that it is actually said by a certain expert, only to find that the so-called expert is not only non-existent, but even the literature that has been generated also does not exist, or does not anchor to truth and reason. So there's going to be a very open discussion, and I think there has to be a certain bit of transparency. That is partly why Elon Musk, in quotes, came up with open AI, transparency, advanced AI systems that are a little bit transparent and be able to understand what is actually happening. But as we talk now, of course, open AI which started as a non-profit, is literally controlled by Microsoft, which funded much of the development of ChatGPT and GPT-4, in that
which is actually being applied by Bing Chat, which is Bing Chat's actually doing ChatGPT-4 now.
Because they released GPT-4 as premium. You could use it you could have access to their APIs, you could do some more advanced things, but it was not. You could get some of the features of GPT-4 through Bing. The idea had been that Bing was trying to retaliate to Google, so for people to access some advanced features of GPT-4, they could use Bing. But the challenge came in with the branding.
So my point here, Mr. Katende, is I understand the discourse that Aaron Marx may have in terms of ethical concerns, but I think, in my opinion, invasion, if you deny invasion the ability to revolt, our greatest fear perhaps would be what? I asked ChatGPT at my other times when I was having an interaction with it, in terms of man's greatest fear was the ability to lose control. Yeah, and then its fear, on the other hand, you gave me that story when the Google guy asked it and said, "What's your great fear? You're switching me off." You know, so it appears we all have fears, on one end. But then, if you're arguing in terms of ethical concerns, where is the limitation? By ethics, what do we mean by ethics if we're arguing in terms of ethics? Because please do not tell me, I know you're a believer, I am a believer myself, don't tell me it's a question of believing whether God exists or not.
It's not.
I'm saying that with all due respect.
It's not.
Yes.
So, I have already given you like two ethical concepts. Human augmentation, bias evaluation.
With bias, yes, we have said so.
There is explainability. The thing is, you must be able to explain what the systems are doing as human beings. We must be able to know that this is the sort of output they are meant to give. This is partly why the challenge was with certain robotic systems in Estonia, which were used in the justice sector. These particular systems could actually give a verdict condemning you to 6 months of community service, but not able to explain why they have condemned you to six months of community service. So it brought issues of transparency, it brought issues of accountability. They could not be held accountable in that sort of regard.
Yeah, but you see, when we argue that way, Mr. Katende, then in my opinion we are losing the debate. Because, listen, we are not making a human being, whether we like it or not. We were convincing ourselves that we're making something as good as...
Ethical considerations are literally recognitions that whereas AI is good or technology advancement is good, there are certain factors that we still need to discuss. There are certain elements we need to integrate into the discussion so that we can have an inclusive world, but also a world that is sustainable.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes, and that shouldn't be a question of debate. That is common sense. What you're saying is simply common sense. Tell me something. Absolutely, that's common sense. That's basic common sense. Yeah. Anything that is natural. We've got food here. If we eat more than we're supposed to eat, we'll have problems. We'll probably have constipation and other things. It's just a question of basic common sense. So let's argue and say, I want you to convince me. You said I'm a passionate advocate of innovation, and I am advocating for that. I want you to convince me that beyond those so-called ethical concerns, because you've argued it that way, but I know those who are arguing the other aspect of saying you are trying to create something that is godly-like. You are trying to put a soul
it's not a question, like from a theological perspective actually. God, the creator of the universe, that breathed this world into existence, cannot be threatened by any sort of human invasion. You think he can? You understand? He holds the world like...
Why wouldn't he?
He can't.
Why wouldn't he? If he was concerned about the city of Babylon winning a war, and they said these guys are going to become one.
The tower.
And let's disorganize your army. Why wouldn't he be?
It was not a threat to his power.
It was a threat to what?
It was a question of his creative order and purpose that he wanted to see throughout mankind. Yes. That is the fact. That is the fact. He wanted, you see, in Genesis 1:26, it tells these guys, go multiply, fill the earth. The guys are busy in the book of Genesis restricting themselves to one particular place and building a tower. You understand? He wanted them to harness the power of the universe. And that is one of the opinions in my regard. And his purpose was for these guys to explore the entire potential of the universe.
Rather than
just concentrating in one simple place. So why I'm saying that is because
I told you you're not speaking.
Isaiah chapter 40 actually says that God sits above the circle of the earth. He looks at the princes of men. For scarcely had their stock taken root into the earth, then he breathes on them, and the whirlwind takes them away. That chapter argues that God has power over life. He can take anyone away, anytime, any day. At the end of that chapter, he says that he brings out the starry host one by one. He calls them each by name because of his great strength and mighty power. Not one of them is missing. God is actually in control of the universe. Even like Mercator brought about the Mercator projection, and Copernicus, Nicolaus Copernicus, talks about that the Earth rotates around the sun. But the biblical descriptions actually give God a lot of credit in terms of holding this world into its place and ensuring that nothing actually can go missing. You understand? So we're talking about a God of all power. He's transcendent, he's above everything else, even though he's also immanent, he's closer to us.
Okay.
So the thing is, there is no human activity
that's like
in that sort of regard
absolutely
that can threaten God.
That's the argument I wanted to bring up, because from a theoretical point of view, there's those who argue and say we are creating something that's likely to be a potential to, you know, the omniscience or whatever of God.
God really is.
He's above all. Let's argue that. That's settled, Mr. Katende.
Sure.
But still, the point that I want us to underscore is that you have not categorically brought it very clear for me that in terms of encouraging people to align themselves, equip themselves, equate themselves to the best things that innovation can bring, we are wasting a lot of time trying to pull it down. That's my concern. That to me is where I'm having a problem, sir.
You want me to become an advocate of technological adoption?
Because I mean,
I have argued from this perspective, because your questions were trying to highlight the risks that are involved in terms of technology, and I wanted to clearly admit that there are particular risks, there are particular worries. That is why we are talking about things like reproducibility, the ability for artificial intelligence to be able to replicate. Like if you build an AI system, it must be able to reproduce the same outcome before you deploy it. That will solve the issue of, well, these systems are actually going to engineer themselves. They're going to develop consciousness, reprogram themselves, and become a very dangerous threat to human beings. So having explored that part,
so do you
let me now advocate.
Okay, do you see a danger that there is ability for machines to lose control?
To lose control?
Yes.
Humans losing control?
Machines losing control. Machine at its best. At its best, like you're arguing.
Yeah.
Do you see that the ability to lose control? That man is like, oh my goodness, I've done something. And he even repents like, Almighty, repent, and I said, and God repented for having created what? Man.
I really do not see that really happening.
You are the same guy who is arguing in terms of the
I was telling you that partly what is guiding this conversation is because the researchers who are supposed to be explaining the power of AI are the same guys that are throwing around a lot of fears. Now, I have a few reasons as to why I think they are throwing around that sort of fear. People started to compare AI threats to some of the atrocities that have happened in the history of mankind. People started, I heard discussions being discussed in the other part of the world that, you know what, AI is as destructive as nuclear energy. Now, I started to understand that partly what these guys are trying to do is to restrict the inclusivity or the inclusion of AI because they have seen the potential it has, and they're trying to restrict it to perhaps their countries. We had this discussion one time. I was giving a lecture at the planning Dala Uganda hackathon. I was telling them that when nuclear energy was restricted to a few privileged guys, many countries were left out. You cannot even use nuclear energy just for purposes of powering the nation. For normal power, it's a threat. You understand? So only the few, the Russians, the
Americans,
the what?
the Israel,
Yeah, they're the only ones that have really the privilege of harnessing the power of nuclear energy. And that explains why countries like North Korea that have said no, we need this kind of energy, have come under lots of sanctions. And it also explains why countries like Iran under lots of sanctions.
Right.
It also explains why people like Gaddafi were tricked.
Yeah, tricked indeed. Yeah.
So the thing is, the same thing applies to AI, because guys have realized that with technology, it's not about which part of the world you are. It's about having the few resources.
Excellent.
And having the knowledge.
Yes.
So right in Uganda, we have built AI. We built a chatbot in 2018, even before generative AI ever became a thing.
Right.
People at Colorado there built UN Global Powers. They built a radio streaming pipeline. AI at literally its best in terms of radio mining.
Right.
And those were majorly Ugandans.
Right.
So I think partly the issue could be that these guys are saying how fast Africa can grow, or Asia can grow, or other parts of the world.
Absolutely.
If this was a plain leveled field,
Absolutely.
where there is free exchange of information, here in Africa it's just a question of resources.
Right.
If you have GPUs, if you have this and the talent, you make it work.
Right.
It's irrespective of whatever part of the world you actually are. You can eventually harness this technology to the best of your advantage. Now, when people start to sign treaties, regulation of AI, treating it to the same level like nuclear energy, it essentially means that
the potential
becomes,
is there, the power is there. Yes.
It becomes a privilege of a few. So before you know it, they're saying that, you know what? Because Elon Musk's first issue was we should not come up with models that are stronger than GPT-4. Before you knew it, you guys are saying you know what? I think AI is just, its power is just too dangerous. We need to regulate it. Before you know it, it will be restricted to researchers, a few countries, a few. So I guess that's one way of putting at it, of looking at it. But I would also not like to undermine the actual threats, like we've talked about the power of which affect civilizations, redefine truth for people, things like that. Those are valid. So your argument would be, how do we make society go forward with more advancements in technology, but ensuring that we are not ending up on the wrong side of the track? Now that's where the ethical considerations which I was talking about. So the issue really should be that AI should be inclusive. That is, we've recently at the Internet Governance Forum of East Africa, I was discussing generative AI in media, and one of the tasks that we had to do was to discuss how to democratize AI to ensure that it's not a concept, a privilege for the likes of Lubogo and a few, but it could actually be understood and readily applied and generally able to easily built in day-to-day solutions around the world. And one of my friends, Kenyan, when Kigali, he coined a phrase, the concept of Afrofuturism, trying to come up with Afrocentric models. And again, this is one of the arguments that were happening this week in Cape Town around this conference of how to use AI and civic engagement within the context of Agenda 2063 of the African Union. One of the issues was really how do we develop models that have the African context in view? Because what you're saying is that ChatGPT is trained on the social construct of the United States of America. Yes, they did a lot perhaps of data scraping from different parts of the world, but the leading truth is liberally bent or left-wing bent in that sort of regard. It's more liberal. So if we are to train or come up with models that are Afrocentric, we would need to have a lot of talent of people which we currently have, we would need to build resources.
Through data, a lot of collection of data.
A lot of data collection, things like that.
Yeah.
Strong computers that can process data in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So that we factor in things that have the context of Africa. Facebook has an open source model, Llama, trained with I think over 60 billion parameters, way less than ChatGPT. But Facebook is enriching its system further as more people interact with it, but it's not really trained with the African context in mind. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's something, if we're talking about the democratization of AI, there are quite a lot of principles that we need to think about, to talk about, to see that AI can become, it's not a solution, just like you would see, this is a spoon, you understand? So if I asked you, is a spoon a solution? It's not, it's a tool.
Absolutely.
That I can use to make my life better.
Absolutely.
The same thing applies to artificial intelligence.
Yes.
It's a tool that is here that many people can ultimately take advantage of to make their lives better, to streamline. You know, the education system could ideally become way better if people embrace technology very much quickly.
And not even education perhaps with a general perspective, but in every sense of the word, AI would actually go in almost every arena of life. I was talking to Professor Golling in Germany, in Nissan, and one of the arguments he was saying is that you could do the very things that you're doing in Germany here can very well be done in Uganda at exact almost the same percentage in terms of quality, because of now the adaptation of the world in terms of the change. And perhaps that brings me to this other question of, I mean, robotics are there best, but how about the fact that now we are putting a chip in a human being? You probably heard what they call transhumanism. Where they're trying to make what they call superhuman beings now. And I'm seeing myself, I'm trying to project in the future. I sit here and I dream about what the world will be tomorrow. Seriously speaking, I could tell you how we're going to run the various systems in the world. I've been in Europe, but I'm telling you something that even Europe, I could sit down and benchmark and tell Europe, this is what you're going to do in the next 20 years from now, because of what I see and dream and see. And I'm talking about transhumanism as the next super human of sorts. The ability of, you probably can explain transhumanism loosely so the audience can understand.
Yeah, well, I think that the world, you are talking about a world in which human beings are literally empowered by computer processing. You don't need to memorize all the passwords in your phone. They're already somewhere programmed in your computer. Wherever you go, they just scan. And a digitally connected world. So literally, not in terms of the human environment, but humans being part of that.
Excellent.
So it's
you see the ability that now you've created something,
because you're now moving beyond the Internet of Things, IoT, to an ecosystem, a digital ecosystem.
Yes.
So what exactly you want me to say about
that? So the point I'm trying to create is that you see that now the world is becoming another kind of thing. We are worried about these AI machines, and there's something over and above that now we are now, the human being is going to be given the ability to be that superhuman machine plus that superhuman being. Two in one of sorts.
Sure. I guess really.
Wait a minute, and by arguing that, and I saw that happening even before. In some countries now, in Europe now, people have those microchips implanted already in their bodies, right? And we're not going to have these phones anymore. In the sense that we have microchips, like the SIM card, put in your phone, connected to a central grid. So I call Mr. Katende and your hand vibrates, and you're like, so what do much Muganda want? Instantly, and the hand vibrates the other side. You get what I'm trying to say? That in Europe right now, what they're doing is they're connecting 5G. I was in Europe and I was watching the 5G. And they're connecting 5Gs in everyone's home now. We're still struggling with 4G. So the world is moving at a supersonic speed, and that's why my problem is, and we have the ability to move at the same pace. I know those are going to argue conspiracy theories. I was one of those guys who really wrote against 5G in terms of the repercussions. In fact, I even actually alluded that COVID had an element to do with 5G, because of the conspiracy theories. But the point I want us to underscore here is that wouldn't that be a beautiful world if we're able to comprehend some of those things in terms of innovation? And I don't want you to argue it in terms of the ethical, because ethics is now gone. Yeah.
Well, you want me to talk.
Yes.
You want me to step on the accelerator while at the same time stepping on the clutch.
You engaged already here.
The thing is, the question of as to whether or not that would really be a beautiful world lies in the potential of really what kind of world that would be. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I am for technological advancement, but I'm also for design thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I advocate for a world in which people are not just coming up with innovations, but also solutions.
Mm-hmm.
That explains why Elon Musk, that is trying to colonize Mars, is spending a lot of billions of dollars trying to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even recently, they discovered this, that, and that. They keep updating us of what is actually happening. Now, the question is, the same gentleman is arguing that human population is not a problem. You understand? That is always his argument. He believes that giving birth or things like that, it's a very huge benefit to the human population, to the world. And in fact, he's one of the guys that popularized this entire free-fall population that happened in Japan last year, what is happening in China, things like that. Now, the question is, the colonization of Mars, what are the objective reasons that are making it a logical necessity for us to colonize Mars? The thing is, it's advanced technology we're talking about here. It's research that we're talking about here. It's a lot of money that we're talking about here. But why should we invest all this money in the colonization of Mars? You get what I mean? So design thinking approach is about integrating in the environment, the personal needs of the people, to see whether what you're trying to build is actually necessary. Now, going by that, your argument would be that, well, I'm having a superhuman being that is being complemented readily, very closely with a supercomputer. Now we're talking about an integration of our brain power. You understand? Because artificial intelligence operates with neural networks at an advanced level, and beyond through neural networks you have deep learning, and then our human brain is working with neurons. So we're talking about an integration of human life, nature, with something that is artificial. Not that it has never happened, like we see how they call it, biotechnology, biomedical technology, and for Zoff, we put another one. The integration is happening. But what are the consequences on the human life in terms of the cause of cancer, in terms of, do you turn into a machine? Do you retain your human cognition, your cognitive abilities? Because you are merging two systems. The three parts of the brain, what are the three main parts of the brain?
I see your concern. Your concern is which is again, in my opinion, I don't want to use a very loose word, but it's a concern for any kind of invention that we're doing, we're coming up with. But suppose it's done with perfection, what would be wrong with that? That's my argument.
Okay, suppose it is done with perfection.
Yes, it has mutated, it has complemented, it has acclimatized, and what's wrong with that? Yeah? Would you spend sleepless nights because of that? In all honesty. Would you?
No.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? So I believe in what Bennett just said. Most men see things as they are, that's why I dream of things that are not, and that's why not.
Yeah, so I get your point in terms of if you argue for a utopia in which everything is actually perfect. That
no, really, honestly, Mr. Katende, you think that
your argument is specifically talking about.
I am not arguing for a perfect environment. I'm saying science at its best. We have to be realistic with that, Mr. Katende.
Science at its best.
Yes.
Okay. I mean the science of when Aaron Turing was doing the call it, that enigma thing, whatever, debunking, being able to expose the German codes, things like that. It was, and he's actually credited for being the father of binomial computation. Those were the World War days, and that was great technology, right? As we talk now, Alan Turing is credited for having been among the first, but where our generation is in terms of science at its best, we are pretty much far. You understand?
Right.
So the thing is, science at its best only gets realized later that it was actually not good enough.
I know, yes.
So the thing is, I'll give you an example. The Nanvia-Stock equation was at one time among the millennial equations, and it's one of the equations that I use because of my personal critique of the medical field. Because partly the Nanvia-Stock equation is the one that is used to calculate the CFT, computational fluid dynamics. If you want to know what sort of tube to replace your trachea with, something like that, you're going to use the Nanvia-Stock equation or the CFD and see what particular pressure, things like that, and then you fit in a tube. The question is, the Nanvia developed an equation separately based on certain assumptions, and Stock also developed an equation separately based on other assumptions. The geniuses that came later combined Stock's equation and Nanvia's equation to form the Nanvia-Stock equation, also based on certain assumptions. Now, when they replace your heart and you have to take how many tabs a day, hundreds of tablets, and your blood system fails, when they put this tube and your system fails, it's a reflection of the imperfections that were overlooked in the advancement of science. Not really that those imperfections, not really that that advancement has not helped. It has ultimately helped so many people
And,
that have come around, but at the cost, the price at which that has occurred has been enormous. In fact, partly why that equation became popular, because they're looking for ways of how to extrapolate its impact in a much more global reach beyond just the specific.
Okay, without using the
areas
word
of
ethical, Mr. Katende, you're smuggling ethics, I can see, without using the word ethical, because that's where you're coming. I mean, we could argue and say nuclear power is the same thing. The same thing that was bombed on Hiroshima and Nagasaki is the same thing that is generating lots and lots of powerful nations and even running turbines and the like. So the point we're trying to say here, Mr. Katende, is, again, we're going bare knuckles now. Let's be realistic, because God himself is a scientist, yeah? And the Bible says, and on the seventh day, he said, everything is what?
Perfect.
Perfect. Is it perfect? I'm asking you, sir.
It depends. The Bible says, like, it looks and everything that he had created was actually good. So what happens in between there is the fall of man, and then corruption.
You're urging theology now, but in terms of being practical, in the very sense of
we're talking about, because you are not going to police God to just one chapter of the Bible. You need to put the entire biblical.
I know, scripture interpretation. Absolutely agree with you, sir.
Yeah, things went wrong because human beings. Because human beings messed up the world.
We'll argue theory another day, right? Because that's another long topic. But today we're talking about AI. But anyway, the reason why I said you're going to hot speed, because every time we're going to host you here, as sui generis, because you'll be in a hot spot. Yeah. So I know you are. we talk quite a lot. We've done quite a number of things, and I know you're quite exposed in the very sense of the word AI. So please don't take offense when I squeeze you left, right, and center. It's just because I want the best to come out of you. I look at you as a gifted young man, and how much you can help the youth and other young people. But again, if you have to say something to the young people today, but also the old, the young and the old, where is the mix? Where is the nexus? Where is the joining thing between, as far as AI is concerned?
So, I will, first of all, the entire generation, we're talking about inclusion previously in our talk. The inclusion or inclusivity is about seeing how we can integrate people that are at the margins of focus. But also democratization means that even though someone might not necessarily be at the margins of focus, they might be within the right ecosystem, but without the right amount of knowledge, without the right amount of resources to actually harness the power of AI.
Right.
So I guess how really we can help the old and the young. First of all, we need a lot of awareness in terms of the potential of AI, and that is where you come off so passionately. The thing is, people must realize the power of AI. I have interacted with a bit of old lawyers that think that things must be done the way they were done previously, and they're looking at technology as the one for lazy people, because for me, well, I used to run up and down, read how many books to get a case and show up in court. That's their perspective. Experience dictates reality for them. Now, technological advancement is saying that it's not about your experience, it's about efficiency. You have 60 years of experience or 40 years of experience practicing the law, but you can barely remember everything that you argued out in court previously. But with technology, you can actually have an entire library of law in your pocket, on your phone. You can have an entire library of law here and there. So people must understand the potential, the power of AI beyond, rightly said, the ethical considerations and the responsible technology that we are arguing for. People must see the potential that technology has, not just to make their life easier, but also to make their world better. Imagine a world in which people, where the word actually pedestrian started as a race way back in England. There used to be like those races that, the person that can walk fastest, you understand? And then things came evolving. So imagine if we were still in that generation, who can walk faster? I have to walk the fastest. There are no cars, there are no bicycles, there are no what. The guys need to understand that technology is here, partly to make things easier, but also to make the world better. So a flight which used to take you back in the days, like how many hours from here to Munich, I'm talking about Munich, from International Airport to Munich, is now a bit faster. You understand? Because of the advancements that have come. Now we see airplanes that can even withstand, sometimes they make no noise, Teslas make no noise, they no bad interference, things like that. The world becomes more connected, the world becomes much more better, idea action becomes better. Just imagine like guys who were thinking about the internet, the web, and how that alone has transformed our ability to think, how it has shaped our perspectives and our view of things. That is enormous. That is phenomenal. It's amazing and exciting. Like my grandmother deep down in the village, who has no interaction with technology, thinks way differently than I. It doesn't really mean that I am wiser, because wisdom is really not a domain of exposure. But it just makes my work way simpler, way easier. I'm cleverer. That's a fact. You understand? I'm smarter in that context, in that sort of regard. So I guess people need to understand, especially the older generation, because the disadvantage here is that the older generation controls literally 80% of the infrastructure. In terms of companies, if you looked around, the guys that have the oldest, the strongest companies, manufacturing in what, they are the older guys, and they are the conservative guys. No room for new ways of doing things. But experience has actually shown that those that fail to adapt actually fall out of place. It doesn't matter like how many years you have actually done Horatio Pagani, who was a design engineer, one of the design engineers at Lamborghini in the 1990s, told these guys that we need to find a way of making the Lamborghini Countach lighter by using fiber technology. When he was not listened to, he quit Lamborghini. By 1993, McLaren had that technology. As we talk now, literally every supercar and hypercar is relying on that sort of technology. That is why it takes, it's handmade. That's what they say. Ferraris, everyone is literally relying on that technology. But now Horatio Pagani has his own kind of car.
Right.
The Pagani Zonda, the Pagani Huayra.
Right.
And there is one which is coming out, I think either this year, and it's already literally sold out. So if you do not innovate,
right,
something is going to happen. And because at the end of the day, like if what was taking you 1 year to do, I'm doing it in 3 months, and in the competition together, I am able, my productivity is higher, my efficiency is higher. Ford, the guy who started Ford, Henry Ford, in 1915, he made a decision to make an assembly plant in which engineers would no longer be generalized as mechanical engineers, but specialized at a particular point of the chain.
Right.
All other companies looked at him as, this guy is wasting resources. How can an engineer who could literally put together a car now just stand, this one is on the tire, this one is here? How can it be like that? It was also more expensive. Even the engineers were not used to that, were becoming bored.
Right.
He gave them additional money.
Right.
Gave them more hours of rest. Before you knew it, all the engineers were literally quitting everywhere wanting to work for Ford.
Right.
Before you know it, Ford was taking over the American market.
Right.
The same applies to Japan. They sat down, they're like, okay, how do we really make a car that can appeal to the American market? What are we going to name it? It has to be luxury. It has to be good. Then they said luxury exports to the US, Lexus. You understand? That is how everybody has maintained their touch and their footing in the world. Like even if you study the banking system, the Rothschilds controlled the banking sector for over 500 years in Europe. Where they after World War I? Someone will tell you, well, if you don't know, maybe they have some influence somewhere in JP Morgan or what. But you see, there was a transition. So there has to be an understanding of the times. There has to be an understanding of the power of this technology integrated into systems, so that people can ultimately adapt. Now, for the youth, it's even a must. You understand? The internet is readily at everybody's disposal, and this is one of the powers of the internet, the fact that you can receive free knowledge. The challenge is that there is a lot of irrelevant, and you must be pretty focused to figure out what is relevant. But the thing is, if you took the right sort of approach, you don't need any. There are even free courses about AI action by Google, by what. There are YouTube channels that have dedicated themselves. IBM has a channel on YouTube trying to simplify complex AI things in the simplest language possible for people to understand. Now, you're not going to argue out that I am not like Bill Gates, you know, like Malcolm Gladwell in his book The Outliers argues for the concept of luck, and he says that people like Bill Gates, they were not just insanely brilliant, insanely smart, but they were absurdly privileged and lucky. He says that Bill Gates is he goes to the one he's born in one of the richest countries in the world, to wealthy parents that could afford a private school in Seattle, Washington, Lakeside High School. The year he joins that high school, the year after, the school introduces computers that could be accessed remotely by the students. And he eventually becomes successful. At one of the first guys of his age to have access to a computer. One of the other guys that had the same privilege was Paul Allen, the person he would eventually co-found Microsoft with. So people would say like he was working 120 hours a week in his early stage with Microsoft. He's smart, he has an IQ of 160. That is literally at the same level of Einstein. But there are over 2 million people in the world that has the same IQ 160. But they're not as rich as
I know, absolutely.
So that is where Malcolm Gladwell really urges for the concept of luck and chance in wealth, and his concept is that success and wealth are not synonymous. They're not the same words. Yeah. So, but going back to the discussion, really, the youth should see this. They're not like in the time of Bill Gates, where there were just a few computers in 1968, things like that. But they have this knowledge is widely distributed. There are lots of models. You see, OpenAI had first released GPT-3, and what was happening at the time is that there were strong models, complex, that were being released, which were being used by intermediate companies, like perhaps in the capacity of character AI, and now. The last man this side, like Justice Bot, could now create a solution using perhaps character AI that would serve the public. What OpenAI did was it released one system that jumped all these stages to the final person. Now, this is an opportunity. It shows you like how technology is evolving. They're not building for the developer. They are building for the future, for everyone. Now, a revolution is happening. It is happening fast. It is here. It is undeniable. It's up to you as a youth to see how to take part in the decision making of your time, things that are going to shape your culture, things that are going to shape your social constructs. But most importantly, as I'm finalizing my submission in that regard, we will need leaders that are able to articulate what particular sort of future they want their society, their people to exist in. It is what you're talking about, what you saw in Germany. It's what guys in the US have seen. Henry Kissinger was bold enough to say that the issues are too important to leave them to the people. These guys sit down and they plan for their nation. They want to see how their world works. You understand? What particular systems, value system, what particular architecture system, what particular canvas is their nation going to operate on. Now, if you came around here, someone was telling you, first ask yourself, how many African nations have a Data Protection Act? How many African nations have an Electoral Signatures Act? How many African nations have embraced the UN policy on AI? You see that? Those are the gaps that we're seeing. If at the East African Forum, there were one of the judges from the High Court of Tanzania was like, you come in court and you tell the judge that the judge is asking, what is the data? And you're saying the data is on the cloud. And the judge thinks you're referring to the literal clouds. And this is the gentleman that actually has to decide on the case. Now, if we do not have a transformation that is sustainable, in a sense that from the leadership perspective, the institutions that make up that leadership perspective, the judiciary, the legislators, things like that, they are well in view. You do not expect to see an inclusive environment of technology happening. I mean, look at, I'm sorry, look at your parliament of Uganda. You understand? Look at it. Look at the chicanery that is happening there. Look at the level of discussion they're having. Fighting over what? The discussions are happening in Parliament. Now, those are the gentlemen, representative of the 46 million people in our nation. Representative of the 46 million people in our nation that are meant to make the decision and the laws that are actually going to govern our social construct.
Yeah.
I am not undermining them.
No problem, sir.
I'm only throwing a torch
Absolutely.
to show you how better you are performing as compared to the global village. Because
How worse you are performing, to use the right word, not so.
what?
How worse you are performing.
No, how good you are performing. No. I am not. I do not want to be on record undermining the majestic August house.
But anyway, the point is this. I think you heard it right from the young man here. As I said, we pride ourselves in engaging in such debates from sui generis here. And I think it was Alban Slater who said the literacy of the 21st century is not the one who can what? Read, learn, and even unlearn. So the challenge is that even as we engage, by the way, almost everything he's talking about, we've actually written about those things. We've written about legal personhood as a book, we've written about the future lawyer as a book, we've written about AI. So almost everything we're discussing here, we've actually written about them. I was just looking through a book here that we're coining right now, talking about sports decoding, the essentials of predictive behavior in terms of generating economic growth, what Uganda can use to benchmark, and all these things are possible in our country. So my friends, I would like to thank you so much for your attention, and I know that we're going to have quite a number of debates and lots of discussions with my young man here at the Sui Generis Center, none other than John and Katende. Those of you who are interested, you can still find more of our works at lubogo.org or suigeneris.com. And he's coming up with an interesting chatbot, right? That you're trying to get.
It's a model.
It's a model.
Yeah.
You want to say something briefly so the guys can get, or you want that on what? Version 2?
Well, I can say it here. Well,
Okay.
what we're basically trying to do is to build a model, but that is Afrocentric, having the African laws, the laws of Africa, readily accessible and available for everyone. It's not really in the context of I'm looking for this law and it is listed here.
Yeah.
But in simplified language, I just chart that I have this particular issue, and the system will use the particular jurisdiction where you are to respond effectively depending on the laws of that land. So
Right.
yeah,
That's the beautiful, and we're gonna work with him so we can give some good information from the Sui Generis law app that many of you probably are aware of. So get blessed for the future. God bless and thank you. Greetings from Sui Generis. Thank you for your attention.